The custom data layer values feature is the most powerful feature inside of the ListenLayer platform and is available in most listeners, including the Unbounce Forms listener. This allows you to write rules to push custom values into the data layer so that you can enhance your web analytics tracking. There's no programming or development required to do this. Once the feature is turned on, you want to make sure that you have some variables created at the global level. Now, all of these are custom variables that are available to all of your listeners to write rules that will push values into those variables when certain things occur on your website. In this case, we're going to create a rule to actually categorize and name our landing page forms within Unbounce. And so a certain use case for this would be, let's say you have quite a few different Unbounce forms and you have two different kind of variations. Maybe one is, you're really focused on driving demo requests. And another one, you might be really focused on offering up content downloads. So the first step might be to look at our Unbounce pages and try to identify how can we differentiate between the demo pages versus the pages that really focus on driving content. Now, perhaps you put something in the URL to easily identify those and you can target that. Or you could simply take every single one of your Unbounce forms and just simply assign it to a category. So in this case, we're going to focus on that second situation. And so we're going to need the Unbounce values. Think of this as almost like an identifier for each of your forms or landing pages. We're going to use this page ID variation. So for every page ID, which represents a form, we need to determine, is that a demo or is it a content download? So the first thing I want to do is get familiar with that variable. I'm going to drill into my variable settings here. Now, this screen will be completely empty when you first turn on the Unbounce Forms listeners. After you publish it and let it run for a little while, those listeners will collect information from your Unbounce pages and forms and make them available here. And so we can see we have form automatic values, Unbounce values. So these are all of our automatic values. And what I'm looking for is this Unbounce value. And we want this thing called a page ID. Now, we could simply keep this as is or make it a lot easier to find by renaming this. This does not rename it in our data layer. It simply assigns a friendly name so it's easier to find inside of the ListenLayer interface. So I'm just going to call this Unbounce page ID. I'm going to save that. It'll make sense why I'm doing that in a second. So now I want to define some custom values. And we have two ways to do this. We can write a simple rule, which allows you to write some really advanced conditions and then simply push, one or more values into the data layer. Or we can write a lookup rule. In this case, a lookup rule is going to be more useful and you'll understand why. And so I'm going to call this form categorization, a description if you'd like. And there's two steps that I have to complete. I have to select the conditions that I want to use in my rules, and then I have to select the variables that I want to define once those conditions are met. Now, in this case, I have three different events I could target for Unbounce, but I would actually like to categorize my Unbounce forms no matter which event occurs. So I'm actually going to leave this empty so that it applies to all the events. And what I want to use in my conditions is that variable that we had already identified as being the way we're going to categorize our forms, which is going to be the page ID. Again, you could do this in different ways. For example, all of your demo pages, you could have Unbounce URLs that have, maybe /demo in them. And you could target the actual URL here or one of the fields inside the form location. But again, we're looking for that page ID. And you can notice here, these variables can be a little bit confusing. What this is a path down to the actual variable you're targeting. and there's a lot of them. And that's exactly why I renamed my variable to make it easier to find. I can also just simply search. I can easily see, okay, here's my friendly name becomes very useful. And once we have a page ID, what I want to do is I want to categorize the form, I want to name the form, and I might even want to give the user an increase in their overall score if I'm going to be scoring my user activity. So what happened is we've generated a lookup table, which allows you to create multiple rules, each of them as a single row. On the left-hand side, we have conditions that need to be met. This one's fairly simple. We're only looking at one condition, which is the page ID. And if that's met, we want to push values into our data layer in these variables: form category, form name, and user score change. So because I can have multiple rows here, it's important to understand that the rules are matched top to bottom. And once a match is found, it will stop looking. And so if we go over here to my page ID and I copy that, and I actually don't need the quotes, so I'm going to delete the quotes. When this form ID is matched, I want to, for example, maybe this is a demo. And this is going to be called, my first demo page. And really, we could actually even push in the variant. Remember, we actually capture the variant here. So let's say I want my form name to actually be maybe the name of the page, and then I want that variant. The unbounce values dot variant. It's actually form automatic values dot unbounce values dot variant. This is just a simple path. So variant is nested inside of unbounce values, which is nested inside of form automatic values. And you can see that here. Variant is inside of unbounce values, and unbounce values is inside of automatic values. And then because it's a demo form, maybe I want to increase the user score by 10. I don't have another unbounce form open right now, but let's say I do have another one, and the form ID, just for the sake of simplicity, is 000. That one might be a content form. And I might do the same thing. I'm going to just push in the variant, and I'm going to push this as the, let's just call this my latest ebook. And in this case, when a user downloads content, it's not as valuable to me as a demo, so I'm going to increase their score by a smaller amount. Now, the cool thing about the unbounce or about the lookup forms is you could have 50 forms, you could have 500 forms. As long as you have a row for each of them, then it's going to find a match as it goes top to bottom, and it's going to return values into your data layer. But then what if somebody puts up an unbounce form and forgets to categorize it? That's why I always like to have a wildcard at the bottom. And this is a regular expression that's going to say basically anything will match. And in that case, I might want to return unknown. And I might want to return the actual page ID here, because if it's unknown, I would like to determine, well, what is that? And I might even want to know what the variant is. So I could always put a pipe again and put in this variant. And then in this case, because it's an unknown form, I'm going to increase the user score by 0. So now what will happen is let's say I'm going to push this data into Google Analytics as an event. Inside of Universal Analytics, I could always kind of push these values into the the label or something along those lines and just kind of chain them together. In GA4, I could attach them all as parameters to a custom event. But regardless, if I have a miscategorized form, I will get that information and I can drill in here and see what that is, and I can resolve the issue, for example. So we're going to go ahead and save these changes, and we're going to publish this. Real fast, I just want to make sure, yep, this form ID, I have it set to contains. We could make this equals, but I'll keep it a little bit more loose and say contains. You don't always need to do this, but sometimes I like to hard refresh, and we will see if our update has made it to the website yet. And actually, you can see right away that it did. So our Unbounce page loaded, and notice all of a sudden our form custom values contains information. Sorry about that. Jump down. And we have form category equals demo, form name equals my first demo page, and we've pushed that variant in there so that we can easily just capture this one variable in Tag Manager. And then we have a user score. And over here, we'll see the same information. And when we submit the form also, we will get all of that same data. Because if you recall, when we wrote our conditions, we decided that we didn't want to target a specific event. We just wanted to target all of the events. And so here again, now we have a form submission, and we can see that the same categorization occurs. So let's just take this to the next level to make sure that it's really clear. Let's say I want to capture this form category and I want to use this inside of Google Tag Manager. I'm going to right click this and I'm going to copy the property path. I'm going to go to Tag Manager and I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to create a new variable. And I'm getting this variable from the data layer. So I need to tell Google Tag Manager what's the actual path in my data layer to get this value. And it's going to be this form custom value form category. And I pasted that because I copied it from down here when I went to copy property path. And in this case, you can name the variable the same, or you can simplify it. And we will save this. Do a little bit of a refresh on our preview here. And we'll reload our page. Hopefully the preview stays connected. Sometimes it breaks. And you can still see our custom values coming in. Let's see if the actual refresh happened. If it did, which it did here, our form category now has a value in it. And so in Google Tag Manager, I can then actually capture this and I can push it directly into Google Analytics. I can push it directly into a Facebook pixel. Or if I'm using a tool, for example, like Google Ads, I can fire different individual conversion tags based on this value. Or I could have a very dynamic tag that uses another lookup table if you want to get really fancy, where you can actually create another lookup table here. And you can say, well, if my form category equals demo, then for Google Ads, conversion label, which identifies the conversion I want to fire, might be ABCD, the value that Google Ads gives you. And if it's content, it's XYZ0. And again, this label would be something that Google Ads gives you as the individual conversion label. And so what this lookup table is doing here is it's taking the form category that we fed it through the ListenLayer system, and it's going to return a specific label that should be used in our conversion. So we would then simply create a new tag. And when it's time to define our conversion label, we're just going to use that lookup table. And that'll return the correct label so that we can basically manage as many Google Ads conversions as we would like using a single tag inside of Tag Manager. Of course, if you have such a powerful and also simple setup, I would always recommend writing notes to document how this tag is functioning so that it's easy to remember. So this is just one example of how you can use customization within ListenLayer to really amplify, scale up, and enhance your web analytics tracking. I'm really excited for you to dig into this and see what cool rules you can come up with as you start to use ListenLayer.